Hey, this is Mike from ehorseracing.com. Unfortunately, you are not going to hear the vocal stylings of Spin Round or Donnie Baseball. They usually keep me on track. So this is going to be a little all over the board probably, but I also have with me probably to kind of keep me focused. I have a player from the game, the amazing Francua4. He's been around quite a bit. Yeah, Francois, however we would like to say it. Frank.
Close enough.
Yeah. So is it, see, yeah, I always call you Francua. It's funny because Larry and I, see, we're both hillbillies. So yeah, you're Francua to me. So now I'm going to see, I'm learning things already.
I'm Francua to everybody. Everybody who reads that the first time calls me Francua. I mean, there's a guy, I run a football league out, different than this. It's another sim. And everybody calls me Francua there. And I've been doing that for 12 years. So it's like, even after you tell them, they still stick with it. So it's all good.
I would try to go with Francois. It's much rolls off the tongue and the palate a little smoother.
Yeah, it's a little nicer.
yeah, I like it. So Francois, now that I've got that correct, we were talking majestic. A little bit. Yeah, very scholarly. But we were talking a little bit beforehand. I thought it was a hilarious story. You do some gaming outside of this, and we'll talk about what kind of games you might play a little bit outside of this. And one of them, you were telling me that you had an interaction with one of your buddies just the other day that was, I thought, pretty funny. So I was wondering if you'd share that.
Yeah, it's just we play kind of a hardcore looter shooter type game called Escape from Tarkov. And I wish I was streaming this at the time, but so I don't have a video of it. But basically, the gist of it is we heard a couple of teams fighting, and it's a very hardcore game in the sense that, you get shot in the head, you're dead, you get shot in the arm, you lose the arm kind of thing. And there's no indicators to tell you who's on your team and who's not. So you have to use communication. I hopped a fence, told my buddy I hopped the fence, was creeping up the side of a wall. He went around the long way. He basically said, I see one of them. And I said, and mind you, I'm creeping up this wall that he's staring at, not knowing that he's staring at me. And he says, am I good to take the shot? I said, absolutely, take the shot. And he drilled me right in the head and ended my game, sent me home early. So sure enough, those are the types of games I like to play, which is kind of lends itself to realism and, kind of the route that the, Derby Fever goes with the sim and whatnot. And that's what I look forward to. So, just the realism aspect of things. It's a lot of fun.
Okay, cool. Any other games you'd like to pitch while you're here as far as your other favorites that you do? I know you mentioned you do some streaming as well. So do you have a channel you would like to share? Would you like to stay anonymous? That is up to you. I'm not going to persuade you either way.
I do have a channel. It's Maverick615. It's over at twitch.com. You can just search for me there and you'll pop up and find me. But yeah, I just play, usually shooters, battle royal games, and stuff like that. More times than not, you'll find me online with drinking a beer and just shooting the shit with buddies and trying to have a good time and laugh. Like that's pretty much the extent of it for me. I did, like I said, I do have the football game, and that's it's called Weekend Warriors Football. Our link is wwpf.us. If you go over there, you can learn about trying to join us if you're interested in that sort of thing. But yeah, other than that, that's about it.
Yeah, I took my stab early on in trying to write a football game, and I learned with horse racing, I learned that a lot of people aren't into horse racing. So I guess I don't have to worry about big companies really doing amazing things. And then I tried to write a football game, and I realized quickly that I was probably as a one-man show, out of my depth pretty quickly. So sadly, I think it still runs, and it's over at deeproute.com. It's possible that it's still online. I know that the guy.
Oh, that's where you shared it at?
Huh? Yeah, it was actually an online game similar to Derby Fever, but it was a football game.
Oh, it was called Deep Route?
Yes.
Oh, I know Deep Route. I've actually played Deep Route.
Have you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Long time ago, but yeah, I definitely played it.
Yeah, I was the guy that wrote it, and it had at least initially, and like I said, I had a good time writing it. It was hard. Larry helped me a lot with it, but again, it was it's a lot more. The thing about horse racing, as you know, versus football is I get a lot of emails from the horse racing game. With football game, I had a lot more players, but not only did I have players, I would get so deep into the playbook, and you could really tweak the playbook almost a second at a time. So I would get dozens of emails, it seemed like every week. It would be like, it was the third quarter. I was up by 7 points with the head in this direction. And, you could really drill down. It's like, why did it do this play? And then I would have to go look, and I would look, and I'd be like, it did this play because you had the box checked, and here's everything you set, and here's where you set the box. And it said that it would do that 30% of the time. So yeah, it's going to do that. So I learned that was one where I really probably would have needed, if I wanted to take it to another level, which I obviously didn't. I probably would have needed some help, and probably, honestly, like I said, it was getting unmanageable. It was a lot. Just trying to run it with the horse racing game, trying to pick up contracts, having a family, and something had to go. So deep route was the thing, sadly.
I don't blame you. It's definitely it's a pretty ruthless player base, that's for sure. They definitely go after their devs when things don't seem to jive with the football.
No, and that's fair. That's fair. They do it in the horse racing game too, trust me. But all in all, I'd say the majority of my player base I really haven't had. Even the players that rake me sometimes, generally they're not malicious about it. They are really wanting to improve the game more than they are wanting to kind of crap all over it. So yeah, the horse racing game, I've found by and large, even the most critical of the player base tends to be pretty understanding. So I'm fine with that. So.
Yeah, I mean, kind of leading into that, the player base here is huge. Like they're one of the most friendly player bases I've ever come across when it comes to an actual game. So for anybody who's new or is just seeing this, like, you should definitely join us in chat. Lots of us are in there pretty much daily. I mean, we're all in there sharing horses, giving, strategy suggestions. What should we do with this horse next? That sort of thing. And you meet a lot of nice people there. I mean, again, there's a bunch of people that I've talked to, and a lot of that I would, call friends now. And, even then, like it's not even always pertaining to just the game. Sometimes it's just shooting the shit with stuff outside the game, work and families and all that stuff. So definitely fun, and it's definitely a welcoming atmosphere. So
yeah, I really, that's probably kept me here doing the game more than anything. Obviously, as we saw with the football game, I kind of left it behind. And actually, I had another guy write a basketball game. I think I mentioned him in the last chat, Jeremy. And early on, as a basketball game and a horse racing game. And I actually took over the basketball game for about a year because he was getting out of it, and we didn't want to see that go under. So I was able to get it to a point. Somebody came along and took it over, and I don't think they ran it long after that. But I think it's back again. It's drivethelane.com if you're interested. So, but that was my friend Jeremy that did that. But yeah, those player bases, while I enjoyed them, I didn't enjoy them nearly as much as the horse racing player base. So I feel like we've been pretty lucky to kind of tap into something good here.
Much different atmosphere here for sure. Trust me when I tell you that.
Fair enough. So with all that said, just I've got a little laundry list of questions here. Nothing too deep. I'm not going to try to get you, to trip up on anything, but I'm just going to ask you a few things. Feel free to interrupt me and say, Mike, these are boring questions. People already know this about me, and turn the screw to me if you want to. I'm really here. I think I told you this beforehand, and I was telling this to Spin and Donnie as well. Is part of the goal of this is to help people know where the sim's going, just feel like they have an open avenue to talk to me. And if anybody watches these and wants to be a guest, as long as you're willing to put your face on here, I'm not going to dox you personally, but also don't want to talk to a blank screen that just says somebody's name either. That's just not the way I roll. And that's not an interesting watch for anybody. Hopefully this is a little more entertaining. So with that said, like I said, obligatory questions. How long have you been around Derby Fever?
Going on 4 years. I started in 2018. Didn't really know my ass from my elbow when I started playing. And I started with the 5 horses that the game gives you. And I remember, I didn't know that at the time. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. I was like, yeah, I got 5 horses. Maybe I'll win some claimers. And, and then, you get the bug, like the competitive bug, like super, super quick. And then I learned, all right, this is all about breeding and getting the right horses and kind of, that's how you compete in this game. And it took me probably about 6 or 7 months before I actually figured that out. And probably a full year before I started actually trying, like, all right, I got to get the top end sires and, going that route. But I had some early success with one of my very first
Okay.
bred horses where I didn't actually had never even heard of the sire before, but somebody was talking about it in chat. I think it was Spin, and the name of the horse was Caravaggio, and
Yeah.
got me my first graded winner out of him as a 2-year-old. So that from that point on, I was like, "Yep, graded wins. Need all the best bred horses. Like, let's go."
So how much did you know about horse racing before you started? Were you kind of a big fan of horse racing or just dabbled in it?
I'm a pretty big fan of horse racing. I've been following since I was a little kid.
Okay.
Fun fact is, at my wedding, Jerry Bailey was actually at my wedding, the
Oh,
Hall of
shit.
Fame jockey. Yeah, he's my wife's godfather. So
Amazing.
yeah, he and my father-in-law are really good buddies. So,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, I've been involved. I mean, not involved, but a fan, gambling and doing the whole spiel since I was about 5 years old. Grandfather let me make my first bet, and I was gone from there. So,
Did you win your first bet, or do you remember?
I did, but I think my grandfather just gave me $10 because I think the horse was up the track. I don't think he even finished the race. So
Gotcha. Gotcha. Grandpa was trying to hook you early, huh?
oh yeah, he got me in there. He calls me every year now, and we discuss Derby hopefuls and Breeders' Cup stuff. So it's a fun little thing for us to chat about.
Good deal. Good deal. So yeah, as far as the game, is there anybody? Obviously, there's, and I'm not trying to find anybody you hate in the game. That's not what this question is. But I know when I play a game, particularly, even if the guy doesn't know it, I always have kind of a friendly rivalry where it seems like there's always somebody that's doing a little better than me or wins the race I want to, and they're always beating me. And then I kind of get this self rivalry, whether they even know it or not, where I'm kind of always kind of trying to beat that guy. Is there anybody in the game that you feel that way about? Again, not asking if you hate anybody, but if there anybody that you're always like, that guy just got me again.
There's a few of them. I would say number one on the list, because he and I actually had a nice, two of our horses had a nice little rivalry last year, where we actually ran 1-2 in the Oaks. So Given is Dan. Dan is one of the best in the game. I've learned a lot from him. He's awesome at it. And, every time I see one of his horses in the race, I'm always just like, I don't care if I win, just let me finish in front of him. That's all I want to do. And it's a fun little, we talk back and forth. It's not anything like, over the top or anything like that. But even the other night we were in chat, he and I, and we, we're just using open mares and breeding. We bred a couple of turfers, a sprint and a turf, and he kicked my ass like always. So, but yeah, it's fun. It's fun doing those little things with him. Valisa is another one.
I call her Valesa, so I think I'm getting everybody's name wrong.
I could be wrong too. I
guess we'll learn now. Now we'll actually know when she comes back and says, Mike was right, or Francois was right, or maybe we're both wrong. Maybe it's Beleza. So there's who knows. Who knows? But there's a bunch of people actually. A guy who's actually turned into a really good friend of mine, SJ Miola. We're actually part of the same handicapping group as well. So and we kind of just found each other in this game, and just we talk outside of he's got my number, and we shoot the shit back and forth now, and do all kinds of handicapping calls together and things like that, and among doing the game. So it's been fun. It's been I've met a lot of nice people. So. Yeah, well, that's actually great. I know that a few people in the game I think people have even gotten married that met in the game, and I know there's been some best men in weddings in the game and things of that nature. So when stories like that for a guy like me who's all bitter and angry all the time, that warms my heart. So now I'm really happy when I hear stuff like that, because it does make this feel like, because obviously sometimes, especially when I'm working right now, it's not as big a deal since I can devote full time at the moment. But when I'm putting in 60 hours a week and I'm coming home and I want to spend time with my family and I've got stuff to answer, and it does get to be a lot sometimes. And, to know that kind of camaraderie exists in the game, and hopefully the game's been a little bit of a vehicle to help create some friendships and relationships. So.
Absolutely. This is like my getaway, man. Like for a good while before, work got crazy for me, I would, be in chat pretty much all day, and we would just, shoot the shit with everybody in there. And it was fun, and it still is. And I would, again, highly recommend anybody who's new to the game or old to the game or whatever, just come on in and join us. And, we're all just having fun, sharing horses and, talking
Yeah.
some bullshit. So
Yeah.
I
Now I
apologize
know.
for the cursing. I'm trying to actually hold
No,
back.
I am a pretty. I probably shouldn't admit this, but I could do a better job cursing a lot less, and I'm on a pretty short leash even in here. But I'll say enough as long as it's like PG-13. As long as it doesn't get too graphic. Curse words
I
to
will
me
definitely
are,
try.
no, that's okay. What I'm saying is, yeah, I'm probably going to drop more than you in this episode. So it's but yeah, as long as it's not graphic stuff, if it's just a shit here or something like that, I'm like, yeah, I'll say that all day. I mean, that's, the way I look at it is now it's, if you can hear that in a PG-13 movie. So I'm not
Right.
too, if anybody's watching this and they're under 13, they probably, honestly, I think by the terms of service, you shouldn't be playing, even though I think Pi did when he was prior to 13, but that's a different story. But yeah, I think most people, I think the words like shit and damn, and I won't just sit here and roll through
Just go down the list.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go down them all. I don't think that's gonna offend our player base too much. I hope.
No worries. I just wanted to put that out there. I apologize ahead of time.
It's more than fair. More than fair. So yeah, and I know this answer, and I know someone else in the chat is similar. But I was wondering if you want to share, kind of, you don't have to share the company, but kind of what you do when you're at your real job.
Oh, I am a business intelligence developer. It sounds fancier than it pays, but yeah, no, it's basically dealing with data, extracting, transforming, loading, massaging, that whole sort of deal, and building metrics and stuff like that. So I'm a huge numbers guy. I will say you've done a hell of a job with the mathematics equations on this, because I have not been able to crack anything. So, but yeah, no, it's that's basically what I do. I mean, I do it in the spare time. I do some freelance stuff too. A lot, usually for other gaming companies.
Okay.
I do some testing for them.
Okay.
But that's about the extent of it.
All right. Good deal. Yeah, it's I know we get in the chat room sometimes and we'll talk a little bit about things, and we have a third that I won't dox out here publicly, but I'm sure people would know who it was if they're in the chat room with us, because I think sometimes we're just sitting there nerding out, talking in a circle, and
yep. just code and just talking, dumb code with one another. That's all.
Yeah.
It's always the code's fault.
Yeah, sitting here asking the most efficient way to join tables or queries, and it's got to be exhausting to the other people in the chat room. So whoever else is out there, I'm sorry.
Me too.
So yeah, as far as everything else goes, like I said, is this is kind of really your platform, and pretty much the other questions I have here. You know what? Before I get into the other two, which I guess could go on a little bit, if you're a new player, or if you see a new player, do you have any advice for them to kind of help them along quickly? Is there any way? I know, for instance, I think personally in the game, I think the auction, I won't say it's underused, but I think that there's sometimes horses in the auction that you can get on the cheap and actually turn around and get some points with. That's kind of the way that I would tell a new player that's trying to get their feet wet, is to pay attention to speed numbers in the auction and really try to find a good place, the right distance, the right surface, try to change surfaces, etc. Try some things the horse hasn't tried. You might get surprised. Is there any advice that you have for a new player that you might see in a chat room that's really looking for advice on starting the game?
I would say, so number one, what you said, go to the auction, right? Because you can get cheap buys and you can, open up more stables and, earn BPs quicker. But number two, I would say, don't use those BPs on claiming horses.
Right.
I made that mistake when I first started playing. And not that it was, I got a couple of horses and they did, they earned for me, and that was fun. But the coming to the realization that BPs are huge in the grand scheme of things, as far as trying to get sires, right? That's the ultimate goal. And that actually leads me to a question for you. Is there ever going to be an opportunity where the player gets the BPs if their horse is claimed out of a race?
Hard to say. I would say if there is, it's not going to be a 1-to-1. Part of the reason for the BP, as you mentioned, is early on, I could be wrong, but I think when I wrote the game originally, I didn't have a BP penalty. And what we learned quickly, and this is a combination of things, starting with, so pretty much it was only sim money that was being traded initially. And what we learned is that people were just claiming everything, which kind of made the claim races almost just giveaways. And the reason it's always difficult for me to tie sim money into anything of value, I know people wanted to value the sim dollar a little more, but the truth is I find it hard to do for any game because people are never going to take money as seriously as real money, sim money versus real money. They're always going to take that chance, as well as if you're lucky enough, say that you come into a game and you're lucky enough to get a horse that out the chute does really well and you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars off a race, then suddenly you're at such an advantage over somebody that's really at the trying to have, he's earning the claim race, he's earning a few $1,000s a race. He'll never get that opportunity to really go out and buy $150,000 claim horse where somebody who has all this money can just kind of go, hey, I'll just try this. I'll go pick this 150,000. So what I did was I tied the BPs to it, not so much as an intention of giving the BP back to the player, but to give players the opportunities to at least put horses in claiming races without feeling like somebody was just going to raid them.
Right.
So as far as that goes, I would probably say from a 1-to-1 standpoint, I probably would never do a 1-to-1. And the reason I wouldn't do that is because, and this is nothing like this, and I think people think people are cheating. That's not what I'm saying. Games are developed and ideas are developed in games. And if the rule exists and the player uses the rule, there's nothing wrong in that. And if I were to do a 1-to-1 BP, what you would see people, they may need to get breeding points over to another stable, and they may have two sets of stalls, and then they could have it over here, and then they get the BP, and they trade the 150 BP over here. Now this stable has more BP, and they can kind of accumulate BP and turn around and buy better sires with it. So yeah, from a 1-to-1 standpoint, I will probably never do that because I think that there's opportunity. Again, not to say it would be cheating, because if I implemented the rule, it's perfectly legal. But I think that the intention is more, I think that it could cause more problem to give that trade-off. Again, I'm not against giving some of it to the player eventually, but the one.
No, I get it. I mean, that makes sense. It makes sense as to why. I mean, you're essentially trying to avoid a loophole or allow somebody to abuse the system. I get that, and I can appreciate that. And I think your solution of giving some but not all, but it's still being penalized all.
Right.
If you do the claim, is
and
probably right on par. It would still keep things kind of manageable.
And I could see potentially too, and I'm just spitballing here. This is the way I think about solutions like this. Is I'm not against even, and I'm not sure if this is a good solution. Maybe we can try to spitball on this. I'm just kind of thinking this off the top of my head. Is maybe it's more of a credits instead of points. So it's almost like, because I would say if there's a BP to credit ratio, and I don't know what the average person would think that is, but BPs are used in a similar way as credits for the most part. There are things you can use one for that you can't use the other for, particularly bidding races or buying races, etc. But if you were to talk a BP versus credit, how much is a BP worth in credits?
Right.
I might, and again, this is just me thinking, and I'm sure if somebody wants to trash me for this, hey, this is just me thinking. I never implement these things without running it by about 30 people first. But maybe instead of having the BPs, maybe take it where you get credits instead. So if you get a horse claimed out of a race and it costs somebody 10 BPs, they would get 10 credits, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it adds up. So just something like that.
Yeah, again, that would actually be pretty cool. I think along the same lines too. I mean, you talked about how sim money is too, right? And how sim money is sometimes it's there's just not enough weight involved with it, right? Like it doesn't mean as much to the player because it's there's nothing loosely tying to there's nothing really tying you to losing it. There's no repercussions to it, right? Is also having the opportunity to use credits in the auction or something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, that would give people the opportunity to sell mares at a certain, currency as opposed to just doing the auction as sim dollars. It would be, hey, current credits or, whatever the case may be. And I think that would be a huge addition.
Yeah. And I think the good news is I think what you're mentioning, or at least where you're kind of partially tying this, you can tell me I'm just full of it, have no idea what I'm talking about. But I know that I've talked to Dan recently. Hopefully I'm not doxing his name too. I think everybody knows who Dan is, so I don't think I'm really kind of doxing him by his real name. But he had mentioned the opportunity to potentially even lease mayors or kind of let somebody use a mayor. And the good news is that's part of with this rewrite, things like that. And I think I mentioned this to Spin. So if I'm repeating myself, I apologize. But a lot of the reason that we haven't seen a lot of changes in the game is because I wrote myself into a corner sometimes with the way things were written. I was in a hurry. I needed to get things done, as well as I just wasn't as good a database developer at the time. I'll be completely honest with you. I know more about my craft than I knew when I rewrote the game. And as such, part of particularly the front end, and I know this kind of sounds weird, I can usually correct a lot of what's going on in the back end pretty, I won't say easily, but even I've written it at least historically good enough. I won't say it's written perfectly, but I've written it good enough that I can make subtle changes and make additions. Where I really get kind of gummed up is on the front end because of using a deprecated language that, as well as the way that I'm approaching this, and I won't nerd out too much, but you'll understand what I'm talking about, is that previously I tied all the pages in together with the scripts. So I would kind of create the scripts on the fly inside the pages, which made any addition and change. You had to go through and look at it. And you had to look at a whole bunch of logic statements, and it really became problematic. Whereas what I'm able to do now is I'm baking all that logic in the SQL stored procedure or function. And as such, when I return the function, now instead of the page reading the SQL and displaying the SQL, all I return most of the time from those functions is a big JSON. And then I let it parse the JSON so I can handle the logic in those SQL functions or SQL stored procs. I don't have to worry about the front end. The front end's dumb, and it's that way by design. So as weird as it sounds, most of my bottleneck is on the front end. And that's what Will and I are really trying to rewrite. So to tie that back,
better to be bottlenecked on the front end than on the back end. So
yeah. And I was lucky there is that at least there were things in hindsight I could have done better. I know that now, particularly I stored, and this is,
but you learn.
Yeah. I store a lot of,
no one does it right the first time.
No, or the 200th time sometimes in my case. But yeah, the mayor leasing and things like that, like you said, the ability maybe to use credits in the auction, things like that, I'm not against. And I really want to explore things like that. That may be one of those things we try. There's been things I've tried and I've pulled back on. I pulled the pin on it because it caused people to be upset, or it just didn't work as I planned, or somebody found a loophole that I couldn't close. There's always the opportunity for those things. But yeah, I would love the opportunity, like you said, maybe to make the auction a little more open than just this practically worthless sim dollar.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I'm not saying that, eliminate the sim dollar, right? Because that's important for the players who, are new, or the players who, aren't in the pay to play mode, right?
Right.
So that's also a crucial part of this as well. I just think that, if you had an owner, or say like somebody new who, hit the lottery, and now they have this horse where they're like, you know what, I want credits, I want to sell it. Yeah. So I can buy another sire, and breed it with one of my mares. Then, that there's the option. You know what I mean? I think it's just about giving the player base options.
Yeah. And I think at one time, I don't even know if it had to be in this version of the game. I think at one time I actually sold credits in the auction just to test it. I don't think I ever followed through, but I think I had it where you could buy X amount of credits and then people bid using sim dollars, and I sold credits for sim dollars just to test it. And I don't think I ever did it again. I don't know why. So but that may be an opportunity too, is again, just kind of spitballing here, maybe turn the auction, have the opportunity for credit in the auction, or have the opportunity to turn sim dollars into credit somehow. But again, a lot to think about there. So I'm not making any promises. So
100% understand. I mean, you got to definitely weigh the good and the bad of all of it, right? So well, one other question I had regarding sires and DS, DDS, all that.
Do it.
So when you buy a sire, is when at the time you purchase the sire, are the ratings locked in at that point in time, or is it based on what's currently in the system? So gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So like if you bought a sire prior to January 1st and say Into Mischief is going to get a bump on January 2nd, then your sire that you bought ahead of time is now lumped in with the new value.
Right. Yeah. And that's what I try to do too, is because it works the other way too. There's always a concern that your sire could go down. So what I do is, what I try to do is I pretty much keep two tables, and on January 1st, and actually even a little before January 1st, if you must know. So honestly, if you're wanting to breed a 3-year-old, with the mare or whatever in late December, usually by December 28th, I've updated everybody positively. No promises that that's going to happen. So don't breed it thinking you're going to get it. But generally, even a couple days prior to January 4th, I take everything up, but I don't take it down. So I kind of pick the highest of the current, what it was throughout this year practically, or primarily, and what it's going to be next year. And so you get the highest value between January and February, or very, very late December and February. And then February 1st, it'll go down. So that gives everybody an opportunity that bought a share and then had the rollover. They don't just instantly get smeared and not know that they kind of know what's coming. And, I try with any of the major downgrades. And the good news is I don't downgrade as many horses as I used to, not majorly. If it's a minor downgrade, I don't usually mention it. And sometimes I know people like to hang on that. They want to know who's getting upgraded, who's getting downgraded. Is that particularly where I was weak in a lot of that early on was the European sires. And I have Ian T, who does a lot of really good work for me. And he sends me great updates, particularly the European sires. I have a lot of great Australian players that send me a lot of updates about those. So by and large, I think the horses are rated better than they were 10 years ago, even. And so we don't see as many crazy downgrades, because usually I'm slow with when a horse comes in, I'm slower. I don't, just because he looked great on the track, I don't instantly crown him. I will never crown, even with some of the great horses like Frankel. I think Frankel is the one that I think I've rated him higher than any other horse as a freshman sire, but he still was not considered what he is now, or what the Into Mischief now is in the game, because we don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
But
so
we have a pretty
just
good
basically
clue.
You have your elite, and then you have your right below elite, and it goes, depending on the track performance, you either hit that elite level or you go the other way.
Yeah.
That's fair.
By and large, I don't miss, and this is not because of me, this is because I have a lot of help, and we bounce a lot of things off each other about particularly how good is the sire? How do they feel? Because one of the biggest determinations about sire, whether he's going to be good on the track or not, is really what mares does he get. It's almost unfair to think that you're always going to get what a sire is going to do, because some sires don't get the backing in the shed. And so there's kind of this balance of who's getting the backing in the shed. How do they feel, especially, and this is where after the first year, I might raise a horse when the horses start selling at sales, and you can see a horse come in and all of a sudden their sales numbers. Desperado does a really good job in the past of telling me, oh yeah, the sales numbers for this horse are off the chart. This horse is probably going to be good. So I always take him at his word, and I'll look into it. And sure enough, a lot of those ratings get good, get a lot tighter even before the real horses are on the track. So yeah, it's the player base that helps me a lot with that. But to answer your question, yeah, it's you can get that bump holding on to a share, and eventually, if you wait until February, you can take the other side of it. So.
All right. So and this is probably a dumb question, because I feel like this would be super hard to code. So, but is there like a trainer to sire bias or something to that effect, where certain sires will just work better for certain trainers, or is it all kind of just like a numbers game? It's kind of luck of the draw.
There's some luck. Obviously, there is a big luck of the draw, like in horse racing. As far as a sire to trainer bias, I don't have that in. I think that's one of those things where it's things like that. To me, it becomes like in real horse racing, it would be too hard to even understand how that might work, because what percentage of sires run for the same trainer. You might have, but it's such a small sample set, and it might be just luck of the draw. I mean, if I think the example I like to use is if your buddy down the street won the lottery, you'd assume everybody won the lottery. And it's easy sometimes to think, one horse does this for this trainer, and then a second horse does that for that trainer. Is that just luck, or could there be a sire bias? So I avoid things like that. I do. Yeah. From a trainer standpoint, obviously what I do though, is if you do a good job of putting your horse, particularly distances, surfaces, wait until they're ready to, wait until they're sharp. Obviously continuing to put them in the right situation, you're going to maximize it. So even though there is from the breeding standpoint, obviously there's the mare, there's the sire, there's a random element that goes in. Pseudo random's wrong, but yeah, based on how good the mare is, how good the sire is, distance, surface,
right,
et cetera. But you can maximize. There's also a curve about as far as, and you've seen it where some horse and they kind of level off. Some horses take a while to get better, and
right.
So
there's
all that's
progression and a regression almost, where a horse just kind of falls off the face of it, or just falls off the map entirely, or then there's one where they just kind of freak at a certain point and go crazy. I've had my fair share of both.
Yeah, and some of that is random, and some of it's not. That's the thing but that's
it's tied into the mare, right?
It's tied into the mare. The mare carries some of it. That's the thing. And some of it can be, especially for how fast a horse develops, that's tied into the sire as well. So yeah, it really is going to depend. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so I guess is there any, all the ratings are obviously hidden, but are there any like special traits that mares carry that can be passed down from, one horse to their, their babies?
Technically, I passed, and I've got some numbers to do this, different numbers, but depending on how the mare is, sometimes a mare is going to pass more of her, what I would call bred traits, where it will be on paper, this is what she should do, and she tends to pass those. Sometimes she passes her racing traits, depending on, so yeah, you can get, and those percentages can vary greatly depending on the sire, depending on just random luck. But there's like some mares may pass primarily their racing traits, and they may do it heavily. So you might see some mares that produce a lot of, even though she may have been what you would call a horse that looked like she should have run 11 furlongs or 10 and a half, but she ran more at 7. You might see a lot more of her horses running at 7 and a half. There may be other mares where, even though she ran 7-inch, most of her offspring will run longer. So yeah, it's going to depend on, a lot of that is going to be random, but also from a random standpoint, it's based on the mare. So if you have a mare that tends to pass these things, her offspring will tend to pass these things at a higher percentage.
Well, did I lose you? Oh, nope, you're
there?
back. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, you cut out. No, you're good. So in other words,
this microphone's trash, man.
Oh, we gotta get you one of them streaming microphones, and we'll get that Derby Fever stream set up so that you can just pass the big races through over there, and just run an episode every Saturday or Sunday.
Hey, I'd love to have some people on here to watch some races and things. So maybe we'll try to do something like that. Get on Twitch. Show me how to Twitch. Show this old man a trick or two.
Oh, super simple, free. It's all free too, so
all right,
it won't cost you a thing. But let's see, what else did I have any other questions? Well, one other, I guess this is something that has kind of been discussed in chat. Some people believe it's a thing, other people who have played the game very long don't, but is pace a factor, and is the final time, is that indicative of anything, or is that more of like just an aesthetic?
I would say this: pace is definitely a factor. So pace will make the race. Sometimes if you get a lot of early speed, it can fall apart. If your horse is a closer and you're not getting any pace on the front, then you may end up not performing to your best. As far as the actual the pace, as far as the numbers go, part of that, I'd say this, and this is just completely honest, you'd probably base more of it off the speed number, and that's simply because I tried to think of a speed number. I know I am not the hugest fan of buyer speed numbers, but I really am a fan of what he tried to do. And I think he was so far ahead of the game in what he was trying to do at the time that it's amazing that he got as far as he did. Nowadays, there's still a human element to it that I don't like as much. I think Briss does a better job with their speed numbers. But by and large, what I tried to do is I wanted primarily the speed numbers to be something that people could look at and know a lot quicker. Could my horse compete here?
Right.
And so, yeah, I would say speed. And from there, depending on the race to race, I would say this, you can look at the early times. Let me rephrase that. If you're looking at the final time, I would base it more on the speed number, but you can look particularly at the early pace. And if it's running 21 and change and it's just barely over 21, those guys are flying up front. Versus if he's running 23-4 and things like that, those guys are going slow. So if you're seeing a 6 furlong race that has particularly those early numbers, or you're seeing a fast close at the end of a race and that kind of closes in, that's going to give you an idea of how the pace of the race set up.
Right.
So those numbers do, especially the fractions, have value. If you're looking just at the final time of itself, I would almost use the speed number more as a basis for that.
Yeah, I've always just been curious because sometimes you see that final time, you'll see it, through different races at different levels kind of be equal. You know what I mean? And it's just kind of like, well, does that mean that my horse can run with great? I got a 2000 claimer that just ran a 110. Does that mean it can run a 110 with you know what I mean? But I mean, I know that not to be true, obviously, but
you know what? That's one of those theoreticals. It's you've seen it before. You've seen it 100 times before. I mean, really, when you look at some of those old claimers, a lot of times, some of those claimers could run, and even in real horse racing, they're there for a reason. And a lot of times they're not always there because they can't run fast, especially at the old Churchill Downs, some of those crappy old 5.5 furlong claimers like the Penguin. I would argue for 2 furlongs, he could keep up with any horse in America when he was at the top of his game, even when he was running those crappy claim races. But there's a level, at least, sometimes he could, but there's a level of consistency that goes into it. And, if you put a horse that technically is fast enough, but he's facing other horses that are going to pressure him, and, maybe 1 out of 50 times or 1 out of 30 times, he could actually finish in the money and do something good. But it's the race after race. And you don't have that many opportunities in real horse racing. Real horse racing, you're lucky. I guess some of those old claimers, sometimes they can run 50, 60 times, but you always, and this goes back to real money versus sim money. And just real life versus whatever happens in the game, is when you train a horse, it costs you real money to board it. It costs you time to train it. It costs money to feed it. You're not going to be out there trying to sneak in and, oh my gosh, I hope that I hit the board in the stakes race when I know I could pick up this claim race and win real cash, and it's in hand. I don't have time. And a lot of those horses are unhealthy as shit down in the claimers in real life too. So you don't have that problem in our game.
Also very true.
So yeah, it's just a different aspect. So yeah.
Any plans to kind of expand on horse performance after race, like with jockey feedback or
that's
anything
in
like
the
that?
plans. That is definitely in the plans. That the things that I would like to approach as soon as the rewrite's done, the main things I would like to add, and I don't think I'm going to surprise many people, is jockey feedback, which I've asked about, and I have a lot of groundswell. They would really like to see that, and with good reason. I do think jockey feedback is important, and I would love to add it. And that's one of those that just because of the front end, I can't add it right now. And what I've mentioned, I think even in the last episode, or the last time I talked with Spin and those guys, is that anytime I spend adding things on the front end now, not only is it difficult, but it takes away from the end game. I'm just going to have to write it again. So duplicating that code becomes problematic. But yeah, that as soon as we get the new site up, the things I'd like to focus on is the ability to, I'd say, lease mayors, or however you call it. I would like to add the jockey feedback. I would like to add a better way to look at claim races. So if you're wanting to get a claimer, you're wanting to get an auction horse, and you can do some research. I know in the past there have been some claim finders that people were pretty fond of in the game that players ran. And I would like to incorporate a lot of that directly in the game to give people those opportunities. But yeah, those are the things, again, that it's just by the way the game's written at the moment, the front end of the game doesn't make that very very efficient. But yeah, I agree 100% with I would love to add the jockey feedback. And that's one of the things near the top of my list when I finally get this thing tested and up.
Sounds good. Sounds interesting. Looking forward to it. Definitely. I mean, well, I'll be honest. I don't usually stay hooked on games for too long. I would say I've been hooked on this one probably the longest
Really?
I've ever played anything. Yeah. So this
Right.
huge win for you, at least in my book.
But
But
I think the players particularly, I think that's what I like to think too, is I hope that I have a good product. I hope that I do know I have a lot of people that have played 20 years. But at the same time, like you'd mentioned in the chat room, I think we've been really lucky to have even if you go through a spell like with any game, and I get it. There've been games that I've quit for 3 or 4 months or even for a year and a half. And I see that in the horse racing game where people may leave and they come back, and it happens. There's playing a game for a long period of time can be, sometimes you just need a break. But I think that I'm lucky to have the people in the chat room and around the game that are so helpful that even if the game hits a lull for you, you've got some good people around, and it makes it a little, you're like, yeah, okay, I'm almost here as much for them sometimes as the game.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. The only other question I have, and I guess it's because we're getting to that point in the year with the Eclipse Awards and whatnot.
Yep.
But is there any plan to potentially implement like a voting system for the player base? The reason why I ask is that I know that you obviously have to limit who the selections would be. Otherwise, people would just spam the hell out of, their own horses. But any plans for, the player base to be more involved? I know we have like a committee now that kind of handles it, but would be cool to see it kind of expanded.
We had a committee at one time. I'm not sure if you were around for that. So yeah, I think we may have changed in 2015 or 2016, and it was just one of those things. And this is why the Hall of Fame's the way it is too. Look, it has certain benchmarks, and the Eclipse Awards have certain benchmarks. First off, the thing we learned is that it's difficult to get people. It takes a lot of time, and still, it's just like we see with the Equinix that we have. I could manage it, but that's going to take me away from writing the game or anything. And it becomes, okay, so usually we have to rely on a player to manage it. And it's a lot of work for them. They've done it in the past, and it's a lot of work. And then they have to get the ballots. And as you said, there's whether or not it's even intentional, there's bias that goes into some of those votes. And particularly the Hall of Fame was one of them early on. I believe that there were a couple of horses that may have been left out originally because of, they were close votes. I'm not saying anybody even meant to do it purposely, but it was more of it was a call. I think there's a horse in the Hall of Fame, and I do like the horse. I think Blue Ant's in the Hall of Fame, and even though I think that he was good enough to get the votes, he probably on paper may have not been a good enough horse to be in the Hall of Fame. But the trainer is one of the most loved trainers in the game, so nothing personal against Blue Ant or the trainer. I mean, that's why. But I think there's always kind of this belief system that even as honest as people are, it's hard to remove that little bit of inherent bias towards for or against a player. Right. And yeah, I think we saw that some, not often, but just enough, especially with the Equinix and the Hall of Fame. But it seemed like the Equinix was one where a lot of times the votes were so close, and the person that lost could make that argument, hey, I won. And if you look at it, you go, yeah, I could see their point versus this person. I realize real life can be like that.
A little bit objective. I get it. It's tough to kind of turn into fact.
Right.
Anybody could, vote one way or the other and make their case this way. If you set a benchmark, it's just easier to say, hey, this is what it is. And that's the end of it.
Yeah. And I get it. I personally, in the perfect world, I liked it better when the voting existed. I'll be 100% honest with you, but that's a perfect world. And we live in an imperfect world. And like you said, it's everybody, at least this way, as unexciting as it is, exactly what you need to do to win that Eclipse Award. You know exactly what you need to do to get in the Hall of Fame. It's not as personable an experience sometimes, but it does remove that, hey, somebody voted for this guy instead of me because he doesn't like me. And it's, I've dealt with those emails and they're no fun.
I got you. So how much do I have to bribe you in order to get an Eclipse? just curious, asking for a friend.
Hey, yeah, no bribery involved. Just do it. I mean, that's the nice thing. Yeah. Yeah. I
All
mean,
right,
really.
then. Well, we'll
Yeah.
take this chat offline then.
No, that's the good thing is now you don't have to worry about the eclipse being a bribery base at all. Yeah, just hit the benchmark, win the races. Could be that easy. As easy as that sounds.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, that was I got one more question for you, and this is more of a, I guess it would be like a I guess an addition or a feature.
Okay, yeah.
A lot of times again, the availability of sires is limited, obviously, for a
Mhm.
reason. You don't want it abused or whatever the
Yeah.
case may be. I completely understand that, which is why they lock and there's certain limitations and whatnot.
Mhm.
Because you don't want the game to be completely pay to play, right?
Right.
The other one aspect or one question I had was, have you ever thought about implementing some sort of like subscription based purchasing system where you charge $20 a month and you're guaranteed a random elite sire or something like that?
I haven't really thought about it. I'm not saying that that's a bad idea at all. That's a brand new idea. I would say that in a ish way, that's the way we're approaching the viewer now. It's not perfect, I guess, but yeah, there's a guarantee. At least you hit a certain pay benchmark and you get the viewer for all your races for free.
Right.
It's not exactly the subscription model, but it's similar. So I think that at least there's been a benchmark set or kind of a standard set that's possible, and that it's definitely not off the table. And that's something, again, I really hadn't considered. So I would have to think about it. I'd have to think if there's a good or that. Pretty much in a question like that, what I try to think of is what's the negative component of that. And if the positive at that point, what's this negative component? Off the top of my head, I can't really think of a negative component. So that's good. And then it will be even if there's a small negative component, what positive component exists? Does the positive outweigh the negative? And should I do it? But
I can think of one negative. I mean,
what's that?
I'm gonna shit all over my own idea, but
do it.
Basically, I mean, I guess in that scenario, if you have, however big the player base is, everybody's doing whatever the subscription is a month, you could potentially overflow the you could saturate the a particular sire, right? So like if everybody gets a certain sire, then now you've seen it jump up from, say, maybe 100 times it gets used a year to 200 or something like that. You know what I mean? Something crazy.
Yeah.
But again, and I'm sure you're smart. You're a smart guy. You could figure out a way to cycle it and make sure you can figure out. The face caught me off guard. You can figure out a way to cycle that and whatnot. But yeah, that would be my only concern is the oversaturation of maybe getting the exact same.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah, I would again, and that goes back to I just have to think about it. There might be a way to correct that or solve that. There may be a limitation of you can pick. Depending on this and this, maybe you can have from these sires, and it may be a kind of everybody picks. And yeah, I'd have to think about it. Like I said, I can see your point. I think there may be a way around it. Maybe, let me rephrase that. There may be a way to buttress it a bit. I won't say around it, but at least those are the things that go into it. And that's the nice thing. I'm really excited. I hope the player base gets why I'm so excited about this rewrite. It's, even though, like I mentioned last episode, is that when I'm done, it's going to look a lot like the current game. Hopefully it'll be more mobile friendly. And I have a feeling initially people are going to be like, what was the point of this? But I'm really excited about that, getting that rewritten. So options like that you just mentioned would be really, really difficult in the current game, but in the new version of the game, it would be so much easier. And I'm excited to think about things like that, because I don't always get the time to do that.
Always about streamlining your code and making the next iteration that much easier for yourself. So
exactly.
I know that sentiment, and I've inherited bad things and had to fix them, and it sucks when it's your own. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, when you sit there and curse yourself for decisions you made years ago, and you're like, God, you just come on, man.
I get up and I just walk away. I like, what the hell? What was I thinking?
Yeah, I think the worst time, and this has been years and years ago. I actually remember doing this. So this had to be even prior to 2003, because the game's been online, I think, since 98, maybe 97 in parts. I don't recall. But yeah, I think it was 98, sometime between 98 and 2000. And it's 2001 or 2002. I used to run a lot of this stuff manually. So I would run the auctions manually at night. Like on a Wednesday, I would update it. Thursday, I would update it. I would literally, because databases weren't cheap back then like they are now. And so I created my own database pretty much. And I would have to upload information to the game regularly. So I would do things on the back end. I would download the information, I would process it, and I would upload it. And at one point, the auction, I'll be honest with you, I was out with my friends that night. So I got rolled in around 1:30 or whatever to fix the auction, probably later than that. And something wasn't working. And I was too tired, probably had one or too many adult pops at the time. And this was probably the worst thing I've ever done. I commented something out just to get it to run. I was like, I'll fix it by hand and I'll comment this out just so it'll run. And then the next time I ran the auction, it like blew all up to hell. I was like, what happened? I went back in the code and I had the comment. It said something like, Mike, you're drunk. You have to fix this. Uncomment this again because it'll break everything. I was like, oh.
Well, at least you were coherent enough to do that. You know what I mean? You didn't lose it entirely.
I don't fortunately have to do too much like that now. But if I'm in the middle of something, even usually nothing that important. But if I'm in the middle of something, I will take at the end of the day, I've got a piece of paper and I just tape it to my screen where I'm at. These are the things you need to think about today. But yeah, I started the laying paper on my keyboard or taping things to my screen at the end of the day. After I did that, I was like, why would I think I was going to put it in the code and remember I put it in the code?
Yeah, no, I'm having that. I'm experiencing that exact same issue myself right now with work stuff, like where I'm just like, oh, you'll remember it. Just come back to it the other day. You know what I mean?
No, you won't.
I've actually been out of work all week, and I literally popped open my SQL before we popped in here, and I was just looking at it, and I was like, I don't even remember doing this. So now, when I come back tomorrow, I've got my hands full. So
yeah. Welcome to my world, buddy. Fortunately, I have been better lately about keeping notes. So, and yeah, it's always a struggle. I think that's the thing, at least from my perspective as a coder, and most coders I know, there is the random stray coder who's really good at documentation and loves it. I'm not that guy. So I'll promise you.
Nope, me neither. I can't. I won't even go into my problems with doing that. But it's not one of my favorite things to do either. So I feel your pain there.
Yeah. So yeah. Anything else you want to ask me? The floor is yours.
Honestly, I don't have anything else at the moment. Okay. I appreciate you having me on and taking the time. It's been fun. I'd be definitely interested in doing it again if you know, whenever you want. And if you're interested in playing any games or anything like that, let me know and pop on the stream with me, and we'll have a few laughs.
What was it, Maverick?
615.
615. Okay, yeah. See our area code here in Nashville, 615. So I was kind of surprised by that. I was like, okay.
Oh no, so birthday for me. So
okay. I just thought I had it wrong. So okay, that's actually shouldn't be too difficult for me to remember. So I guess if you got nothing else, I got nothing. Yeah, I'm going to pimp your Twitch station. Go check out Francua on his Twitch station at Maverick615. Watch him get shot and fall off walls or whatever happens. Yeah. And
watch me fail miserably.
And if you get an opportunity, as I mentioned, if you want to be on, if you want me to have this conversation with you, if you want to rake me over the coals personally and watch me stumble and sweat, and I'm fine with that. Just if you reach out to me inside the game, you can go to the Connect. You can send me an email, let's just send it to zoomcall@ehorseracing.com. You can actually send it to anything at ehorseracing.com. So if you want to send it to Mike's a big fat jerk at ehorseracing.com, I'll get it. I won't like it, but I'll get it.
That's how I got on. So,
and then finally from there, you can reach out in the Slack chat room. I think it's Derby Fever Mike is my name. So all that said, Francua, I'm glad to get your name right finally after all these years.
No worries.
And
No, I was just gonna say thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
All righty. Well, thank you. And I will stop the recording.